All right, we're live. Welcome to Let's Talk Markets on this beautiful June 4th. I don't know if you guys, I mean, I imagine Dennis, well, you're probably getting some of that smoke, but also today the weather's beautiful here.
No smoke here. We've been
No
okay.
smoke.
I
All
think
right.
it's far enough away, but unbelievable to have 80 degrees because we've
Hmm.
been like 7 months of snow where I am at. It's just been awful. So it's like I'm almost foreign to this, but it's so nice to have. Actually, we need to do have a little bit of smog maybe today. It is a little bit
Yeah.
maybe smoky out there. I haven't
This
really
the
noticed it.
sunset last night was beautiful here because of the wildfires in Manitoba.
Yeah,
Air
it's
quality was
crazy how far
fine,
that
so it's okay.
goes.
It's
Like it
crazy.
goes
I know.
thousands of miles. Like I don't
Yeah.
know how it's even possible that it can go that far.
Yeah, someone in DC was telling me that they were
Yeah.
they had it down from Manitoba. Same thing. So I don't know about you, George, in New York. How's the weather there?
I,
Good?
I mean, I didn't see anything. I've definitely seen when I was in San Francisco, like that. There was that big fire there, but I feel like fire season is a thing now. It seems
It,
like on a
it's a
yearly
thing.
basis, there's like you're lucky if it's just a big smoke pile around you. We've certainly seen a lot worse. Uh,
Yeah,
it's one of the lovely late stage capitalism experiences that we get now.
that's right. Great. Yeah, so it's warming up here in Canada. The economy's heating up, or at least it's maintaining. It's surprisingly strong up here. Market's doing great, right? Like crazy.
Unbelievable.
crazy,
Unbelievable.
crazy good. So May market soared. S&P finished up 5%, its best month since November 23, 20% off its April lows.
Yeah. Like I mean it
And that,
started in April and never looked back, and
yeah,
this market is your classic climb the wall of worry because there's
yeah,
been lots of
right?
things to worry about. But it is just resilient, and now it's full on just looking past the tariffs. Like the tariff tantrum of April is completely over in the past, and in reality it really isn't because July is coming and we know
Yep.
we just kind of kicked the can down the road here. But this market, I've been saying, just doesn't really look forward that much. Like a lot of people think the market's very efficient and always prices in 9 months ahead. I've always argued it's very inefficient and sometimes doesn't price anything in.
Yeah.
So I think the second half could be dicey, but I've been calling for new all-time highs because I think it's just it's like the most hated trade right now. It's what people don't understand. And this market's always likes to punish the maximum amount of participants. And I think all-time highs climbing back up, and we're only like 3% away from it now. Would a lot of people earn a lot of cash and people chase it. So I kind of like the scenario all-time highs and then the rug pull. That's what I like.
That's the Max Payne scenario,
I think
right?
so.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, before we get into it, it's really great to have both of you back. It's been a little bit. George from Prospero AI, Dennis Dick from the Stock Trader Network. I want to start by taking a moment to congratulate George. Big deal. Prospero AI was recently named the best AI fintech startup in 2020
Wow.
of 2025 by the Global Financial Market Review. That's
Wow.
amazing news, George.
Congrats,
Yeah,
George.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the shout out for it. Yeah, it's a lot of we've been at it for a long time. My team has worked really hard. A lot of the founding team worked for 6 years without much to show for it in terms of pay. So I'm just really grateful for the team that's like believed in this for a long time. Before any of the awards started rolling in.
Huh.
It's
Oh, nice. Plural. You got there
yeah,
must be
just the
something coming
beginning.
down the pipe, huh?
The first of many, right?
That's right.
It's the first one's the hardest to get. Then everybody else wants to pile on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so look, you guys have been coming on here for a while. Undoubtedly, we have some people that weren't around in the earlier days, don't know what you guys do. So why don't we just start uh, with a quick intro, just to catch everyone up. So George, what does Prospero AI do?
So Prospero AI has a really simple mission to put institutional quality data in the hands of retail investors. And I would say to go beyond that, also simplifying it and making it something that could be explained in plain language. Like two of our signals are literally called upside and downside. So we can have a simple conversation with people like, should I buy the stock? And I can say, well, is the upside higher than the downside? So, we're really trying to make kind of advanced analysis simple so people with busy schedules can, keep up with the markets, make decisions quickly. And yeah, we have an app that's more self-directed and a newsletter where I'm, teaching people, exactly how I use the signals, how I, use them well. Our worst year in those newsletter picks have been 47% above the market in the last 4 years. So yeah, about 114% up this year. So yeah, if you haven't checked it out, probably very little reason why not at this point.
I have found myself trading your picks, but generally speaking, I do. And this is not a there's no exchange here. I've recently become an advisor to George's firm, but nothing monetary. And I find myself checking the app anytime I'm considering taking on a position. I think it's great. It's great analytics, and I agree with you. It's the kind of thing that if you were an institutional trader, this is the kind of stuff you would be looking at. And obviously, it's so aligned with Irvin's mission to get that kind of information in the hands of the retail investor, which is why, of course, George has been coming on and why we originally connected. So yeah, I love it. And Dennis, what about the Stock Trader Network? Tell us a bit about that.
Recently launched about 6 weeks ago here now. We obviously worked with Benzinga a long time, had the pre-market prep show, still running the pre-market prep show from the Stock Trader Network. So that's our flagship show that we do run from 8 to 9 every morning. And then we've just got our chat room. We call it the STN room. We've got a good group of people in there just sharing trading ideas, trying to learn about the markets. A good group of people, Christian Fromhertz, Joel Alconin, Brent Slava, who was obviously on Benzinga News Desk for a long time, 10 years there. So we're breaking news, we're trading headlines, we're trading news, we're trading charts, we're active trading room. So, and it's an active trading network. So if you're interested, it's stocktradernetwork.com.
Yeah, that's awesome. And pre-market prep, that show, like we said, we've known each other for quite a long time now, about 15 years, we guess. And that show's been around since then.
2013. Right? We started in 2013. Wild, so it's 12 years we've run pre-market prep now. We've got a good audience. We get about 5,000 people watching us a day. So it's a good little group. It's a good crowd. It's fun. I've done it for a long time. So, I plan to continue doing it for a long time as well. So it's fun.
Yeah, every morning, you want to know what's going to go on in the markets. You want a great overview and a bunch of, deep dives into individual stocks. That's the best place to get it. So definitely really appreciate both of you coming on and spending the time as always. So, let's get to it. I thought we'd start off with, let's actually, you sort of alluded to it, Dennis. So let's jump right over China. We'll get back to China. I think we got to talk about Taco. I think how can you talk about markets today without talking about Taco? For those who don't know, and you're probably living under a rock if you're involved in markets and don't know, but that's okay. It's okay. We're here for you. The Taco trade, which is coined, I think, by someone who writes for the Financial Times, means Trump always chickens out. And look, we're not here. We didn't make it up. We're not saying it's true. I'm not trying to be politically inflammatory in any way.
We stay neutral.
We're purple here. This is not, but it is look, people know one of his negotiating tactics is you come on real strong, and that leads to what you hope are concessions. And to be frank, we have seen that work. We have seen it not work. And right now, I think we're seeing a mixed bag on tariffs. But I was talking about this. I was trying to explain this trade to my wife, and I was like, I think it's just BTFD, right? Like that trade's been around forever. That's been like the trade since 2009, right? Since we came out of the financial crisis, nothing has worked better than BTFD, which is buy the fucking dip, right?
You could argue that's been the best trade of all time. The markets have always tended higher. So if you were buying the crash of 20 or the 9 or whatever, 27, 29, I forget, the crash of 87 and all this, BTFD has worked the best.
BTFD,
the best strategy.
And forget it.
strategies.
right? Set it and forget it, BTFD and forget it. And I feel like Taco is just a version of that that people that maybe don't like Trump came up with. But what you see is you see him threaten, like Liberation Day was a huge threat. Market tanked, recovered very quickly. But again, if you played that trade, BTFD, you would have said every time it crashes, I'm going to jump in because I don't, I think it's overblown. And I don't think this is going to be an issue. So, what do you guys think? Has this been your approach in markets? Is this what you're seeing? Is it a good trade, or is it something that's just worked up until now and we're just early days?
I mean, for me, I'm not as we see this, like these free falls, like I'm not saying to myself, I like being completely honest, I'm not sitting here being like, oh, this is a good time to get in there. And you gotta like, I mean, it's one of those things that, sometimes in the BTFD trade, I've never heard it abbreviated that way. Sometimes in that trade, kind of ignorance is bliss. I feel like if you're trying to like wrap your head around what's going on, it's hard to be like, this is a good price at the time. I mean, but luckily, some of the signals that we've talked about, like net option sentiment on like, SPY has been really, really accurate this year, getting out in front of even some of this tariff news a few times. And then when it recovers, that's kind of my signal. So I've really had the benefit of that because, each of these times I'm looking at it and I'm saying like, maybe it has another 20% to go down when we're in it. Right. And I mean, I think the only other thing to say about this whole situation, right. And I think we got a very pronounced version of this clarity, I think, with the debt downgrade. I think around this spending bill, that is truly frightening on a long-term basis in terms of, looking at, kind of, I think what we're going to get to a little later, which is, like a Musk-Trump fight now. But it's just like, this was supposed to be the administration that was going to cut costs, right? Get us in better shape. That's what I think the promise of this administration was. So it's just like, okay, why are we seeing this rally? I think, where there's rating agencies that are just be like, we got to start covering our ass on this a little long term. I think on the other side, you're just seeing people be like, well, why wouldn't we buy stocks, right? What happens when the wealthy get tax cuts? What are they buying, right? Stocks, right? They're buying more stocks. And it's like very easy, eventually we're going to have to pay the piper. But like right now, like, yes, I think the taco trade is very interesting. And I think that, you could get frightened about tariffs, but, it seems to be just brinksmanship that we're dealing with. And I think no matter how frightening it gets, I think people kind of have that belief. And that belief is going to create a better support structure for the market. But at the end of the day, I think we're seeing the same thing that we've seen since the last market crash, which is basically like, it doesn't matter who's in government. They're going to make sure that the stock market is healthy, that people have the capital to buy stocks in whatever way, it's being made to happen. And I think, that just might be our future, that we're going to keep getting this market stimulation. There might be a lot more volatility under Trump or, whoever, whatever these events, debt downgrades or anything. But I think until we are insolvent, this might be the market that we're dealing with.
Even if they are insolvent, I mean, it might just continue anyways. I mean, this is where this market is. And it's the most resilient market. I've been saying this on Stock Trader Network and Pre-Market Prep. I mean, this is one of the most resilient markets I've ever seen. Like the last 6 weeks of nonstop buy the dip mentality out there. No worries about tariffs anymore. No worries about slowdowns. No worries about, like, we get a headline, it knocks us down for a couple hours, and then we bounce right back. I mean, it's unbelievably resilient. And does it change is the question. Like, do we eventually, pay the piper, down the road? Maybe, but that's probably not happening right now. I mean, obviously government spending is going to continue to go up. Tariffs are, still a question mark because there's going to be some companies that obviously suffer. Maybe Apple, if they've got to make iPhones over here, it's going to be really interesting, or if they have to eat some of these tariffs. But I mean, that's a whole nother conversation itself. But this market isn't worried about what's going to even happen years down the road. I don't even think it's worried about what's going to happen in July right now when the tariffs, we've got a date here coming where, we might have, tariffs more put in place. But the market is not even looking that far out. It's just looking right now and saying, let's continue this party.
I mean, it was crazy, right? Like they come out Liberation Day, they announce all these new tariffs, drop, and then nonstop up since then. Halfway through the court says, nope, these tariffs are illegal. The market's like, okay, we're just going to continue on our way. We are already on. It doesn't seem like anything can phase it. What about this week with China? Right? Things are bad with China. We're in the midst of this 90-day cooling off period.
Well, we rallied 200 S&P points because the White House tweeted out that we have a deal. And then you realize it's not a deal. It was the framework for the idea of a deal. And now we don't have any deal at all. And
did it give those 200 points back?
And the market doesn't even care.
Doesn't care.
Yeah. I mean, but let's talk about the Apple thing for a second. Isn't that just another taco thing? Like, I look at that, and I don't look at that as a tariff. I look at that as the Trump administration being pissed that, Tim Cook turned down the Middle East invitation. Like, that's what I look at it as. And it's just like, I definitely think it's a situation that if, Tim Cook doesn't play ball and do what he's asked, a little more, it might escalate. That could turn into a very real tariff, potentially. But I just think that's another taco situation. I think Trump wants to let Tim Cook know that he should think a little harder about his invitations. I don't think he really intends to force iPhones to be made in the U.S.
I think you're probably right.
I think that Trump is, generally speaking, politically very astute. And for example, in this big, beautiful bill coming through, these massive Medicaid cuts, he has come out, seems against them, knowing that that's how you lose elections. You lose elections by cutting Medicaid, for example. I think he knows you would lose elections if suddenly iPhones doubled in cost or worse, right? That's not, and no one would attribute that. We can already see that the White House is laying the groundwork of accusing the Fed of, any economic headwinds. They're going to lay the blame on the Fed. I don't think they can do that, and I don't know that anyone would buy into the Fed being responsible for the cost of an iPhone doubling or more, right? So I think that's a good point, George, that it really is emblematic of the bluster and threats, but not necessarily, but that as a negotiating style rather than the follow through, being concerned about follow through actions.
I think the market really believes it's going to be 10% across the board, and it can stomach that. It's not a big deal. And if that's where we settle out on everything, it probably isn't a big deal. If China comes in, and they're going to do 50%, which sounds a lot better than 140, but I mean, even if it's 50, I mean, you've got some companies that are going to have to pass some costs through. Walmart, your dollar stores, a lot of your retail. I mean, think about Amazon. Like, there's so much stuff that comes from China there. 50% tariff on all those goods would definitely impact the U.S. consumer. So, but I think this market is not thinking that. I think it's more the taco stuff where it's threats at this point in time, and the end number is going to be a lot lower, a number that the market can stomach. That's where, at least what the market's thinking.
Feeling is that the market is really underestimating what this administration wants the end state to be with China. And maybe it's because a lot of the Chinese trade activities got wrapped up in other in other activities, right? Like, so when the first China stuff came out, it was after Canada and Mexico, and it was felt like it was part and parcel of that. Then it was part of Liberation Day. I think the market is underestimating how differently the administration, or at least I should say, the economic influencers inside and outside the administration, how they see China. And Bessent likes to minimize these concerns regularly. He's always, he even came out and said that decoupling is not the goal, but I don't think that's true. And at least, look, if you read people who are extremely influential in the current administration, economists and such, the central theme of the entire trade policy is bringing in everyone else and pushing out China, right? And even with the Liberation Day as across the board threats, the point was not necessarily to tariff these countries. It was to come up with trade deals with all of these countries that can help rebalance trade on the one hand, but that push China away on the other. Now, I don't think they're doing a great job of it, because I think they're pushing a lot of countries toward China, but that's neither here nor there. Decoupling is absolutely one of their top goals, and the only sort of sensible goal when you look at it in the context of what their actions have been, regardless of what Bessent says.
Yeah, I mean, I think an interesting thing that you said there was, I'm not sure if the market knows, where this is really going to end up or is pricing that in. And I mean, I think I'd do you one better and say, I don't think the Trump administration knows, where it's going to end up or has any. I don't think they have real targets. I think their goal in this is to show that they are willing to push back on China. And I think that intent is not a bad idea, considering where we've gotten with them in trade. I think that, especially some of like the espionage that they were doing, he's completely right about that. Like, we can't just let them continue to just steal products from us or buy chips through other countries, against the policy that we're making. I think he's absolutely right that we do have to stand up for ourselves a little more.
And fentanyl is a serious issue from China, not from Canada. From China, serious problem.
But I think, to your point, it's kind of the other side of the coin too, right? Where it's like, if you don't have, whatever you're doing, right? If you don't have clear goals, it's very hard to get the outcomes that you want. Yep. And I think that's the other side to it, where it does look like, we're pushing the EU a lot more towards China, I think, especially. And I think that could be the greatest damage from this. Because, the UK wants to play ball. They're basically, like a brother or sister of ours, or, whatever. But like, the EU includes some pretty far east places relative to where the UK is, who are probably a lot closer to being like, well, say what you want about the government of China, right? If we're dealing with a stable counterparty versus an unstable counterparty, and whether you're saying the unstable counterparty is, the Trump administration, or whether you're saying, like, if it's going to be Democrats and then Republicans and Democrats and then Republicans that want to pursue different policies, there's inherent instability in that. I can see the logic in thinking China is just a more stable partner. And I think that's the real damage in this. Like, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, whether or not this actually helps us with China specifically longer term. I think there's fair arguments to be made on both sides of the relations, if this does anything with the espionage, all that stuff. But I do think there's a fair argument to be made that we had to try something. But are the costs in relation to other countries going to outweigh the benefits of that? I think it's fair to ask questions about that.
100%.
I mean, comparatively,
I totally agree with that. I think that a properly articulated trade policy would have complete bipartisan support, right? Like, this doesn't have to be one of those things that we're constantly polarized over and fighting over. If it was properly articulated, it's the kind of thing that should be win-win across the board, even if there's a little pain early on. And if you don't know where you're going, you're not able to communicate that. And if you're not able to communicate, you're right. It leaves complete uncertainty, and it leaves it switching so much as, if you look at, The political swings in the U.S. over the last 4 administrations are just insane, right? Totally insane. Obama to Trump to Biden back to Trump, like that is just crazy.
Yeah.
And how are you as an international counterparty supposed to deal with that when there's no continuance and nothing that the two agree on 4 years to 4 years?
Well, and that's probably a consideration for all these companies here too. Like, I mean, it takes 3 to 4 years to build a factory in the US. And if you're thinking, well, we're 3.5 years in here, by the time we actually get this factory operational, there's a possibility that Trump is no longer in government. And all of a sudden we did all this for nothing. So it's hard, like, you know, if we're going to swing back, and if we swing back and we follow, when, you know, sense the pattern forming here, if we're going to swing back to the Democrat is winning, 3.5 years from now, then it's probably no point for these companies to come in and start looking at building these factories. So they may do some small stuff to appease Trump, but I don't see all these major companies like Apple coming in here building factories to build iPhones. And if they do, it's not going to be human beings building the iPhones. It's going to be automation. It's going to be AI coming in and doing it because they can work cheap. I mean, you can't replace a Foxconn worker at $2.50 an hour in the US. It just is not going to happen in North America at all. Labor is cheap over there, but we can replace them if it was AI doing it. So, you know, that's a conversation in itself as well. But maybe this pushes, you know, that's maybe why these AI companies have this relentless bid under them, because maybe they win no matter what.
Yeah, well, sorry, go ahead, George.
I was going to say, I think what we're talking about too, and, you know, I think about, you know, what you said, Dave, where it's just like, you know, a bipartisan trade policy with them would be a great idea. But it's just like our problems for, I'd say, a long time have been more political than economic. And it's just that I think we're sitting here and it's the same thing on both sides. Like the Democrats would rather point at Trump and say, this guy doesn't have a plan, than try to work with the Trump administration and find a plan. And it's the same thing with, you know, it was the same thing with Biden. Biden's a disaster. Biden inflation, like all that. And it's like, was there ever an effort to solve these problems together? No. They'd much rather just everybody just like point at the problems, and nobody ever wants to create lasting solutions. And until we have some way to do that, like, I think especially US-China policy is going to be more about, you know, undermining and, you know, taking, you know, veiled shots through the media than any kind of real policy that benefits both sides.
Yeah. And if you're China, you're thrilled with that, right? You are absolutely thrilled with it. It is pushing the world towards you. You've been, you know, eating the US up from the inside with fentanyl. You've been stealing all the IP. It is an incredible success story, unfortunately.
There's no hurry for them to make a deal. There's no hurry and like pressure on China here to make a deal. And that's why I don't think a deal's coming anytime soon. I mean, you know, White House was excited to announce a deal, which wasn't even a deal. So it's I think she's sitting in a good spot here right now. And that's why I don't see a US-China deal imminent here. I think we'll get some smaller deals, maybe enough to push the S&Ps to all-time highs with some smaller countries here. But that big one is the full deal is probably not coming anytime soon. And China is very, like you were saying, are very articulated with the way they do things. They're not going to just, you know, respond to, you know, Trump's threats on social and Truth Social or Twitter or wherever he's threatening. They're just probably looking and just shrugging their shoulders at that. And, you know, again, you know, this taco trade, they probably laugh at that too, you know, thinking that, he's not serious about any of this stuff. He's just shooting his mouth off again.
Yep.
Well,
all right.
So that they don't want, you know, we know that they don't want the escalation, right? There was a mutual interest to get rid of that. But other than that, the status quo is fine for them. Like,
sure.
if there is a deal, it's going to be with concessions from us, to your point. Like, there's just not a fair deal to be made that they're interested in changing the status quo for.
Yeah. You know, unless the U.S. can marshal global allies in a coordinated fashion to establish a trading bloc to really turn the screws. And, that would have been the right approach. And obviously that hasn't been the approach. We'll see. We'll see how things continue to develop. Let's take a turn, though. Dennis, you talked about robotic factories in the U.S. Do you think that Optimus will be one of those robots? Where are you at on Tesla these days?
And again, I'm kind of more. I was bullish Tesla in 2024, very bullish, and then I sold most of my position in early January because I was worried about the brand damage. I was worried. I can't quantify that. I don't know how much brand damage has been done here. I'm still worried about the brand damage. We've had an incredible run back in Tesla here. But now you're looking and all of a sudden, Musk is like out of Doge and he's vocalizing his disapproval, one, with the spending bill, but, with other things as well. Like he's called Navarro dumb as a sack of bricks. He's had a screaming match apparently with Bessent. Obviously a lot of people this administration, he is not getting along with whatsoever. So I just worry that, got Democratic voter that is saying, I'm not buying a Tesla because of all this stuff this guy has said. And now you probably get, if he starts to if Trump and him start to fall apart, that relationship, you may get the Republican voter that's saying the same thing. Well, I don't want to buy a Tesla now here either. So I mean, no friends you pissed off everyone.
Yeah. Pretty impressive for the richest man in the world.
It's a serious problem. And that's why I think Tesla stock is starting to roll over the last couple of days, because I think there's serious concerns that, if he loses, let's just say, because we never know what Musk is going to say next. If he says something anywhere even close to negative about Trump himself, Trump does not stand for anything negative towards himself. You can talk about his bill, the big, beautiful bill, and not liking it. But if you said something directly against Trump, and I hope he doesn't say it, Trump will not stand for that whatsoever. And he'll be completely, where they were, you had Bessent a month ago on CNBC saying, get out there and buy a Tesla. This is the best vehicle ever. I mean, that's all gone now too. Yeah. So this marriage between Musk and Trump is slowly falling apart here. And I think it's a problem for Tesla. You can see the international sales. China sales were down 14% year over year. European sales down 49%, last month year over year. I mean, the international buyer is not there. So there's a serious issue with the cars not selling here right now. Now, can robo-taxi, can full self-drive, can humanoids, can the story carry the stock and continue to carry the stock? Well, that's the reason it's $333. I've made the argument if none of those things existed, if there was no full self-drive, no robo-taxi, no humanoids coming, I think Tesla's a $100 stock or less. So it's a lot of potential there. And I'm still long a few shares because I can see the long-term potential here. But there's a lot of things to be worried about with Tesla as well.
Yeah, right about when you got out, it was about when I got my Tesla puts. I was pretty happy with that trade. I got out of those at a pretty good time too. Now it's rallied back up. So George, I go into Prospero and I'm looking at Tesla, and it's got long-term 100 upside. The short-term indicators look pretty good. Net option sentiment is reasonably high, 77 right now. What is that telling you about Tesla? Even though, again, it feels to me like it's an environment in which it should be crashing like crazy.
I think Elon Musk and this extended, Tesla thing, it's going to be one of the more interesting case studies in the markets ever, right? Because it goes back before that, right? Him starting all these companies too. Even just that is pretty unprecedented in modern times. And being able to, run them, because, Dave and I both had early stage companies. If you go to an investor and you're not saying it's 100% of my time, right? Pretty much every investor is going to say no. So somehow he's pulled that off to begin with. And then, I'm going to circle back to Tesla here. It is absolutely incredible what is going on with their sales and the way.
Yeah, just to give everyone a bit context, we pulled some numbers together. In France, new Tesla registrations dropped 67% in May. Overall sales down 47%. Sweden registrations are down over 50%. registrations down 30% in Denmark, 36% Netherlands, 68% Portugal. It's just across the board an astonishing drop in sales. And you've seen the secondary market as well really weaken.
And I mean, this is the thing that I have to like that I've been quoting lately. That is just like it's just like completely unbelievable. Tesla's 2025 forward PE 245, right? Nvidia is I mean, they have different reporting, but Nvidia's 2025 is 48.2 and 2026 is 35.3, right? So like just compare those companies and Nvidia's incredible growth, right? And they're both in exciting industries. They're both going to benefit from AI. You could even break it down like if the Tesla, if the Optimus is successful, you know, that's going to be a lot of Nvidia chips in that, you know, in those robots. So it's like you could even tie those two businesses together, and then you just see the difference in how they're valued. It is absolutely, absolutely incredible, unprecedented to see a company of this size falling in sales. Well, its contemporaries are all growing, you know, pretty crazy amounts, and still be valued that way. And it's just
still going up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like
it's the poster child of this market, climbing the wall of worry. Not Tesla. There's no stock out there that climbs more of the wall of worry. The sales go down, the stock dips, and it gets bought back up in the afternoon. It's relentlessly bought.
And that's the one thing about what Dave said in terms of like you know, looking at maybe getting Democrat, but like I actually think picking a fight with Trump might actually be the smartest thing for like I think there's so many Democrats that hate Trump so much, right? That I think he might actually get people buying Teslas again if he can thread this needle. It is a risky needle. It is a risky needle to thread. But like you look at what's going on in Prospero, right? And to get 100 upside, right? You have to have like long-term options bets live. A lot of them betting above where the stock is. You know, analysts have to like it, and you know, price momentum factors have to turn, you know, positive again, which they have. So I think, especially the longer term ones. So I think when you look at all that, you know, why we built Prospero is it's just like there's something to that. I think there's a general belief from the people that know more than any of us in aggregate that like in the long term, this is going to get sorted out. And I like, there's a part of me that's just like I got to believe that. And then another part of me that's just like what we've talked about in terms of full self-driving before, like for that to be successful, there's such a regulatory element to it that I'm just like, that part just doesn't make sense to me. Like picking a fight with the government as you roll out your most important high earning, high margin product that is going to depend on the government to help roll it out. That's the counter argument to what I just said about all these people believing that I just like, I can't fully grok, if you will.
I could see the thought process being, well, thanks to Doge, I have completely decimated any oversight and regulatory agencies that could put a stop to this. So I don't really care about the administration at this point. I am going to try and get my sales back up with those people that I've pissed off. And, you know, I'm not worried about any pushback at all. But who knows, right? It is just staggering. So, okay, let's just riff on that. What you were talking about, and let's talk about NVIDIA for a second. NVIDIA is another story. Right? It is off its lows by 45%, and it's up 4% on the year, at least when we checked the numbers a couple days ago, right? Yeah. What? How? What is going on? How is this even possible? What a swing in
back to like
in one of the largest stocks in the market.
Yeah, well, it's just back to AI. That money managers want the story, the AI story, and NVIDIA's in the pole position for it all. So valuation, you know, doesn't matter at all here at this point in time. And it's not even that expensive when George is looking out there at 2026 and saying 35 times and it's growing like crazy. I mean, there could be some pull forward, but there's just been such exponential growth here that I'd rather own NVIDIA than Tesla at this point in time for sure. When you're comparing 240 times with declining growth, declining sales, not even declining growth, declining top line altogether. I mean, it's just a kind of a no-brainer here. But really what has driven this rally, there's been, some value stocks that have been holding on okay and coming back. But I mean, healthcare stocks been a disaster. You start going through sectors, there's a lot of stocks that just, really didn't participate that much at all. Where AI stocks, they're all coming back. I mean, AMD, is like obviously a competitor. It's 50% off the lows. Dell, is obviously a big with the servers. You just go across the board. The AI trade just remains the place to be. And the market continues to gravitate to those storied stocks. They believe AI is here for real. I think it is too. And those are the stocks that the market keeps gravitating to. So NVIDIA in the pole position is the stock that everybody has to own in their fund. I mean, imagine being a money manager and you say you don't own NVIDIA. They'd be like, what the hell? You get fired for that stuff. Not owning the best companies. So there's no choice. You have to own NVIDIA.
But all that being said, like you like danced around it a little bit. I never thought I would say that NVIDIA is a good value. And I think it's a good value right now. I think their projections, upping their projections, have outpaced the stock being a little up and down with China. And you look at it, you look at that forward PE, the way they've grown. Like, I actually think, I think it's a value. What do you think, Dave?
I'm telling you, one of the first things I'm going to go do is put on a pairs trade, short Tesla, long NVIDIA. Like, this is, how can you go wrong with that right now?
Announced, and Optimus will do a little dance or something, and Tesla will be up 10%
Forget
on that.
about it, right? Yeah.
A little robo dance. That's all it needs to do. Bang. Gone. It's up.
Isn't that like, this is the market where nothing matters but a tweet by a guy with a 7-second video. But no, I mean, I'm totally in agreement with you guys. And frankly, if you're playing the taco trade, you're playing China being more open to the U.S. than what they have threatened, right? And the restrictions in terms of chip sales. I don't know. I'm not going to say being removed, but maybe there is an opening that we don't see. It would shock me from many different perspectives as someone who sort of is very, I have to say, I'm very philosophically aligned with the goals of Trump's trade policy. And I have been, I have got a lot of things that I criticize about the administration and criticized about the last administration, but I am totally on board with the goals of rebalancing trade, pushing China out, and onshoring manufacturing. I think those are excellent, admirable, like I said, bipartisan goals that they are not achieving, but that they are espousing at least. And that is just like one of the foundations that this administration is built on, is those three things, achieving those three things through trade policy. And if they were to open, and to step back, if Bessent is correct, and the goal is not to decouple, then they are going to step back. They are going to open more to China, and that would be a bonanza for NVIDIA, right? So, it could be that the market continues to underestimate what NVIDIA should be trading at.
You look at NVIDIA too, and I think it really started to come back when the Trump administration kind of loosened the Biden restrictions, right? Yeah. And I think that's when you look at this stuff sometimes and you're just like, policy versus optics. And you're just like, okay, so wait a second. We're taking this hard line with China on the one hand, but on the other hand, we're like loosening these restrictions that we put in place because we know very well that they're buying chips from these other countries. And so it's just like one of those things where you like sit back and you're just like, like what we're talking about. We're just like, what are the real goals here? Like, like some of it, you can only kind of conclude that the real goal is just to, like we're talking about, just like show that you're willing to stand up a little bit to China and not kind of these like practical policy elements. But to me, like that, I've started adding NVIDIA to the portfolio because it's just like, to me, that was the major risk of it. Just like, okay, are we going to come out of this where NVIDIA is going to basically be able to sell less chips, right? Have less access to Asia, right? But I think that's, I think a lot of the market now sees it that way, where it's just like, okay, regardless of what happens with China, they're going to be selling more chips to these other places that are going to feed into China. China's going to be creating the demand for. So yeah, I think that was the major kind of tailwind for NVIDIA that I saw. And actually, like, the other component to it is like right around that time, NVIDIA's like upside breakout in our app was typically around like 60, and it shot up to high 80s, low 90s right around that announcement. So right there, I think you saw the institutional sentiment that we're talking about right now completely change, and people are just like, well, I thought maybe the Trump administration was going to be a tailwind on NVIDIA sales. It looks like regardless of China, that's not going to happen. So I think anyone that is not taking this NVIDIA run seriously and thinking that they're, back on track to go on another big run up, especially if Taco continues, I think you're really overlooking a company that, was definitely previously overvalued, and now very much isn't.
Okay, so we're all sort of seeing very similar things. We're seeing the markets rally like crazy. We're seeing a lot of these stocks that got hit so hard having these, massive bounce backs. Back to where you started, Dennis. Is this all one big bull trap?
It's possible, and I think it would be really like the market's way to like make everything hit new all-time highs in June and breaking out. And it's like this market, I've said for a long time, it doesn't look far ahead in prices in almost nothing. So if tariffs, and again, it's a big if because we don't know where these tariffs are going to land. If they're going to land 10% across the board, I think the markets are going to be fine. If he's going to come in and it's not going to be a lot of trade deals and China's going to be a tough negotiation and going to land a lot higher, there's going to be some repercussions going down because really, when you look at tariffs, it's a tax on the U.S. consumer. So it could hit in the second half. Like you're not seeing any impacts in the first quarter results, which we just got. You're going to see maybe some start in the second quarter, though, which we will get come middle of July. But then you also have this July 6th date looming of, okay, now we have the 90-day pause on tariffs. Are they going to restart here? Or is it more taco stuff and he's just going to kick the can down the road again? I mean, stay tuned because headlines are going to drive this. You also have the Fed sitting in the background. The markets at one point in time were pricing in a 95% possibility of a May cut. That obviously didn't happen. And, now you get Waller saying, maybe one cut this year. I don't think there's going to be any cuts this year because I think
I agree.
Fed, you're looking at so much uncertainty here. The economy is doing fine. Why start cutting prematurely and all of a sudden inflation starts to kick back in because you have a bunch of companies passing the tariffs through to the consumer. So, I mean, inflation could be a story ticking back higher in the second half, and that could be something to derail the markets too. So I think there is two scenarios here. The one scenario is this 10% across the board on tariffs and the markets are at all-time highs, no problems at all. The other scenario is that's not, and there's tariffs that are a lot higher on China, and we start to see inflation creep back in. And that would be like the July rug pull, where you start to see, earnings, you have more guidance, companies conservative on the guidance, and where the consumer is spending a little bit less because they have less to spend if they're paying tariffs. So there's two scenarios really. And I guess there's always two scenarios, up or down. But
up or down. Either markets are going to go up.
Sideways.
They're going to go down.
Sideways. I don't think the second half's going to be as easy as the first, this last 6 weeks, though. Like, we're up 20% in 6-7 weeks. I think it does get tougher. But I do agree with George that NVIDIA is one of the biggest positions in my long-term portfolio. I'm not selling because I think it wins no matter what. And that's why I want to stay with those AI names, because I think companies will look more to AI if if the margins are getting squeezed, they're going to look how can they save money, and AI is going to be a way for a lot of companies to save a lot of money going forward. So I think AI trade is just getting started actually. So you look at Nvidia, maybe you're looking at AMD. I mean, there's 100 companies out there you could look at. George has a great portfolio, probably a lot of them looking at them right now. But I think that's where you stay. I think it could win no matter what. So I stay in the AI trade.
Yeah. So what do you think, George? Is it a bull trap?
I think it's a BTFD situation, right? Like I do not think we are out of the woods. Working. Like they're like I would bet on more threats versus not. Like I don't think it's just smooth sailing from here, right? And if I did have to bet on this, I think we are much more likely to get an extension of the pause with China than some kind of deal being worked out. And I think the lead up to that pause or no pause is going to be pretty stressful. I think we might be getting another week or two of 150% tariffs again, before we get that other pause. But I mean, just like where we started, I think there's going to be a lot of this volatility. I think, you have to be a good pattern matcher if you're going to do well in the markets. And the pattern that we see in Trump's second administration is there will be threats, right? There will be threats until there's something resembling what he wants. And right, I think we're all agreed that I don't think China's going to give him that anytime soon. So Occam's razor tells us that it's going to get tense again in July, that there's going to be a dip, but most likely that dip is going to end probably pretty abruptly with a pause or some maybe we get a little farther along. The framework of a deal is announced in addition to a pause. But I think I think it's silly not to expect something like that at this point.
So one of the themes of his first term was that he really cared about what the stock market was doing. He has tried to downplay that in this second term, and the administration has tried to say they really don't care. And yet, of course, they've taken actions nonstop to try and buoy the stock market. You think that continues? So I mean, I think that's sort of, to me, that's kind of the central question here is, does he actually not care? Or is it the main barometer that he views success with?
I think he's proven that he cares because of the Trump, we were saying, maybe there's no Trump put when it was going straight down and somebody was tweeting a video, Trump's intentionally tanking the stock market to,
right.
And then,
trying to bring yields down.
And that all ended. The day he kicked the tariffs 90 days down the road, that was the initiation of the Trump put. It came back that day. And then they talked up the markets relentlessly for a month straight. It was almost like the administration was in cahoots to talk up the market because there would be a tweet. Oh, we got a deal coming. Every time the market would dip a little bit. Oh, we got a deal coming next week. There's trade deals coming. They've talked this market out for the entire month of May.
To what extent do you think
that back and alive and well?
To what extent do you think they saw? Let's say that they were intentionally tanking the market, with the idea, we've talked about this before, with the idea being that would lead to a flight to treasuries that would bring yields down, and there's a tremendous amount of debt to refinance this year. That's a very plausible sort of motivation to assign to them. They did it and it didn't work, right? So it was crazy that we saw yields actually continue to rise as the market was crashing.
Yeah.
Do you think they might have said, well, this isn't working, so why are we crashing the market? Forget that, right?
I think that when you look at whether it was, I think there's certainly an argument to be made that the yield thing makes sense. I think there's certainly an argument to be made that Trump intended to win a war of attrition with China you know, maybe it's a combination of both, and that he actually, you know, you hear him talk during that time. And it did seem like he didn't mind digging in. You know, there was a lot of people saying, you know, ignore the stock market, short-term pain, long-term gain. Right. But there's one thing that was very clear to me from that whole situation. And, you know, when he got up there and said, you know, people got yippee, you know, the way he said it was like, I do not think he was talking about the American public, right? Like, how many like random retail investors is Trump like talking to, caring about? I don't really think so. I think the people he's referring to were Ken Langone, large Republican donor, Bill Ackman, you know, those were the people that I think he was saying got yippee, and those people do have his ear. And I just think that, you know, there's a lot of things about Trump that make him a different politician than what we've seen. But at the end of the day, this is an American system. And when you're pissing off Ken Langone, and maybe you want to win another election, maybe you want Vance to win another election, or the rest of the Republicans, you know, I don't think yippee donors is something that he could tolerate. And I think that was it more than the markets, because he clearly, like, if he wanted to save the markets, it would have been a lot soon. Like, the time would have been a lot sooner than when he eventually did that. So I don't think, I don't think he liked all the phone calls he was getting about, you know, from people that donated to his campaign. And I think that's what we're going to be looking at going forward. There's only so much pain before that tension rises. And I don't think he will push it that much to the brink again, given the forces that mounted against him last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point. All right. On that note, we're going to wrap this up. Again, thanks everyone for joining us and listening in to Let's Talk Markets Live. Thanks, George and Dennis, so much for your insights and sharing your experience with us. And, you know, I can't tell everyone enough, check out Prospero AI, check out the Stock Trader Network, stocktradernetwork.com. Just two excellent applications. And that's what you get, you know, on both of those. And what you get here is just, I think, unparalleled insights into what's going on in markets. And, you know, I think we'll all try and figure out together how to position ourselves for the next couple of months going into July, and then how to position ourselves for the rest of this year, because it's going to be an adventure. If there's anything you can say, it's going to be an adventure. So thanks again, guys. Join us next week, same time, I think, same place, for Let's Talk Markets. We're going to welcome Claudia and Ophir back and talk macroeconomics to follow on from this stock market discussion. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.